So the project I'm currently running is mainly trying to understand the development of Chinese communities in Coventry. As we all know that as ethnic minority groups, Chinese migrants has been, well, in many ways has been marginalized or isolated in the British society. And although we do see like a rising voices and also more increasing visibilities of Chinese faces on different media platforms, however, if you do look around in Coventry particularly, I still think there's very little to be seen. Therefore, I'm hoping that my project would be able to bring out those stories, those unheard stories, and particularly the generational changes among the Chinese community. So I'm hoping that taking food as a shared cultural memory and artifact as an entry point, that it can offer us different angle to look into Chinese communities, and particularly using food to examine the generational changes and also the gender dimensions of how different individuals within the community experience their life in Coventry. Yes, so, and also personally, I'm a foodie, so I really think that I do believe that food does offer all sorts of memories that connects among people, among places, and connecting across cultures. So I'm quite excited to see what my participants of this project can bring and tell their stories through this angle.
Yeah. So can you talk a little about like what's the original plan of your project, and how did the outbreak of COVID-19 change your plan?
Well, actually, I initially, when I first started, I was really excited about taking this opportunity to really go into the different Chinese communities. We all know that there's no single like one homogeneous Chinese community. There are different waves of migration into the United Kingdom, and obviously, city of Coventry also reflect this kind of diversity. So initially, I thought I targeted at several so-called, let's say, main Chinese community groups. For example, the Chinese church in Coventry and the Chinese school run by volunteers and parents. And also, I was hoping that be able to interview people from this kind of a new generation of immigrants into Coventry who come with their partners or working as professionals and going to this kind of parents group because they all have young children. So I was hoping that I would be able to do ethnography to meet with my participants face to face and to be able to experience their daily life, observe it, and somehow be part of it. However, as we all know that because of lockdown, because of the cancellation of a serious event because of COVID-19, all the Chinese New Year celebration got cancelled early this year. And obviously later on, it's very difficult to really go to meet people, not to mention even share food. So my initial plan was go in there and share food, share life with my participants, just has to change. Yeah. So I was hoping that we could put up this kind of display and tell their stories. Now, because of the obvious obstacles and challenges, and I have to basically figure out run the exhibition online. So that's something that really pushed me to think, okay, maybe I could still do the exhibition, ask my participants instead of me going to take picture with them, and they can share photos they took themselves with me, and we can move the exhibition online somehow.
Did any of your interviewees or participants talk about the racist attacks or abuse they encountered during COVID-19 in the UK?
So both me and my research assistant interviewed quite a lot of individuals who basically experienced lockdown in Coventry. Surprisingly, actually, we did not hear much this kind of overt racist motivated attack. However, we do have participants mentioned that they somehow sense there's this kind of almost awkward weirdness going on when there was this kind of interactions with certain people. So they felt that they have been singled out because they look Chinese or because of the virus, and they have been treated differently. But I would say it is more my impression from this project is that I feel like instead of saying this kind of very obvious attack, it is more subtle. It's much more like a microaggression, I would say.
Uh,
When I was working with young people, like current students, I'm very impressed by how many of them were talking about they really, really want to tell their own story, their own experience, because of the space and time given them to reflect on their experience of living in the UK in general. And they feel like they have daily encounters of this kind of stereotypes about Chinese students. They said they have to really make effort to explain to their British friends that as a Chinese student, their life is rather different from what their British friends think their life should look like. So when we were discussing that, what we could do to bring about this kind of visual exhibition, what kind of story they would like to tell, a lot of them actually said, "Oh, I would really like to show them how my life actually look like in China. It's not always about red lanterns, about dressing like a so-called stereotypical Oriental dress. My life just like you. It's yeah." It is normal. It's not like, I think a lot of them has voiced this kind of experience of being viewed as the other, and almost in a way that has been exoticized. So they really want to use this opportunity to tell the story, say actually we are pretty similar. So I think that's a very interesting thing, and I'm also quite excited about that opportunity this project has given them.
so as you like as a Chinese living in UK, have you ever experienced like this kind of unpleasant racialized behaviors in the public or generally in your life in the UK?
Well, I would say my general experience of living in this country has been quite positive. I do think that British people, those one I had interaction with, are main predominantly very welcoming and friendly. However, I personally had experienced people, basically men or young boys and lads, just being push each other towards me, and we even while I was just walking on the street. So that kind of thing does make me wonder, well, is that because how I look, and how, because I'm a woman of color, and I'm a woman looks probably young in some way, and that makes me place me in a slightly more disadvantaged position, and that contribute to such experience. And then that does make me wonder. And another experience I had recently was when, during the pandemic, I was walking in a garden, which we all trying to keep the social distance. But this lady, she was very basically verbally, in a way that shouted at me, say, "Well, how rude you! You should have just stayed away from me, even though I did keep the 2 meters distance." And that kind of experience does make me wonder: is that because I look different from the so-called majority white British women, and I was treated like this? But these incidents, you can't really you can't really generalize it, but this kind of unpleasant aftertaste does make you wonder: is there something behind this kind of typical stereotypes because of where I come from or how I look like?
And can you tell more about like the things that actually impress you the most when you conduct that project?
I was actually quite moved by some of the stories that my participants have shared with me. Like different generation of Chinese women were standing in the kitchen, working together, preparing food. And I thought, when I first started about this project, I said, oh, well, of course, food will tell us a lot about the cultural history of the community, who make the food, who they eat with, what do they eat, and what does this kind of food symbolize or carries its cultural meanings and reproducing culture. So all these things fascinates me, this kind of questions. So when I was talking to 3 generations of women, Chinese women living in Coventry, when they were preparing food together, that was, for me, that was just a very touching thing to see. because you see this kind of emotional bond within the family, and you see that although you see the clearly generational changes, and the younger woman does have much more flexibility in terms of maneuver between so-called inside and outside of the family home, and they all have professional jobs, but still the family kitchen becomes a gathering point for them to discuss their lives and share experiences and bonding with each other. And that is a very, personally I find that's a very touching picture. So hopefully in my exhibition, this kind of image can be like conveyed and communicate across. And I do think that as a cultural element, and this is something that my participant has told me they particularly want to preserve, this sense of home, that the home has been protected in a way that mirror love and bonding among different family members. On reflection, I do think that as so-called ethnic minorities, and that living in this country, I do find that the aspect of collective living space, creating this kind of communal space in your family home, people cooking together, eat together, does render a different picture of British life, because we are part of British society. And very often we imagine this Western society as this kind of individualized. A lot of sociologists has written about eating alone, for example.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? But at the same time, we should not neglect that there are communities actually still carry this kind of warmth within their family home, within their family kitchens, and people do. The kitchen is a place that it's a gendered place, but it's also a love space that brings people together. And food has becoming this kind of bond. And that this is a story, part of the story of British life. And I think the story that has not really been, how to say, done justice and in a way to be represented in the media.
So to what extent do you think like this, your project can respond to the current racialization or racism against Chinese or Asian communities in the UK, especially after COVID-19?
For me, I think my understanding of the whole thing is very simple, you could say. I do think that who has the power to tell what kind of story matters. And we have been, I mean, within the feminist circle, we all know that, and the power to view, the power to tell the stories. So I hope that through my project, the response would be women or individuals, particular women from the ethnic minority community, will be able to have opportunity to share their stories, tell their stories in their own way. So I think that can be a very empowering experience. And I hope that through this, more individuals on each side could be influenced positively, to be able to see things differently, to be able to experience reality differently, see, aha, actually, that is how it is. It's not what we often think like this. I think that's what challenging the stereotypes looks like in daily life, if that makes sense.
In the future, how would you use this project to make bigger influence or to make a change?
Well, I would say, I guess change always happens from the ordinary moment, isn't it? I do think that change happens little by little. So when we think about if, for example, if I have a discussion with my Chinese students from China, about racism and the racism they experienced in this country, I think I would also personally would like to welcome more critical reflections on both sides, because I do believe that racism affects each one of us. And I think in terms of students, they also open up space for more reflective discussion about how they experience it, how in our daily interaction with one another, we're all being shaped by this kind of structure. It's a structural issue. So I hope that because of there are several these kind of bad incidents has happened because of COVID-19. This will open up space for more open discussions and reflections. And I really hope also the students within the Chinese communities, their experience of studying abroad can also give them the chance to reflect about racism. And because I do think as Chinese, living abroad, I do think we are living a very interesting time. And this kind of discussion reflection are crucial.
Yeah.